Hey guys, Sage is here, and welcome back to another one of these things where we're in this weird dimension where people seem to like watching me talk about video game characters and discuss which are some of the better ones. I don't know, it's your choice, you're the weird ones here, so I'm just gonna go with that. Anyways, welcome back. Let's just hop right on in and see what we got queued up for today's little episode, shall we? So we're gonna hop on into colorless, and that of course means that we have some weird characters here, but mostly people have been asking me to do another healer, so I guess we're going to take another look at a healer, and today's healer is Elise. Now I debated having her on the list before Clarine, who we talked about previously, but I kind of went around her and was like, I'm not so sure, but honestly, looking back at it, it's kind of a regret of mine, and Elise is definitely one of the more powerful healers, mostly for aggressive teams, and we'll get into that right now. So starting right off the bat is Gravity, and what Gravity does is, well, when she attacks, after the attack, the enemy unit will be reduced to 1 movement square, which is pretty fantastic. Means she can kite around, especially since she's a troubadour, which means she has access to a bit more movement. So Gravity, first off, real good. So let's talk about her special skills, and in this case it's Kindled Firebomb, which when healing, she basically applies an all ally +4 attack buff. And then of course she also has her command skills, which are Heal, Mend, and Recover, and that basically restores health because, well, she's a healer, it's 5, 10, and 15, but be aware that Recover adds an additional cooldown to your special skills, so be aware of that. Just saying. Next up is her passive, which is actually kind of interesting, and it's called Live to Serve, and what this does is whenever she heals an ally, she will get 50%, 75%, or 100% of that amount healed back to herself as well. So basically she can heal herself while healing allies, and that is pretty much a quick look at all of her abilities, and now it's time to move on to pros and cons and where I give my final thoughts. Alright, I'll just say it, Elise is a valuable healer, but only if your team is good at being aggressive along with her. She has good heals. Not only that, she can heal herself if she does take damage by, well, healing other units, and she has useful skills that revolve around her buffs and debuffs. She's also a troubadour, which means that she is a cavalry unit, which means that she has a bit better movement than most healers, but it's time to move on to cons, and well, I can only really think of really one, and that is, yes, she's a healer, she's frail, and I know people are going to point that out, but moving that aside, she's also not very well tuned for defensive teams. If your team is just going to sit there and try to wall other people out, she won't be better suited than some of the other healers that can, well, mix with that. So essentially, you want to team her up with some good attackers, some people who will go in, do damage, maybe get hit a bit so she can heal them, and then continue to fight. So less about defense and more focusing on attacks. And again, she can stand toe-to-toe, she can kite people around, especially if they're more melee units. So bring her along if you want to have a good, like, blitzkrieg attack in a sense, if you don't have someone who can already buff attacks. And that way you can rush in, do damage, not worry too much about things, and hopefully the fight will end quicker. So, I mean, that's Elise for you. There you go. With Elise out of the way, and honestly, colorless have a lot of healers that we do need to go over, but we're gonna move on to red, and hopefully you'll understand what a true red unit is all about, because this next unit, oh my god, it is Lucina, and she has a lot. So if you played Awakening, you probably already know about her weapon, the Falchion, and that's kind of a signature part of that game, and a crucial part of the main story in some cases, and of course it's also her weapon here, so, you know, why not? And, well, the Falchion, it's effective against dragons, which is a plus, and at the start of every third turn, the unit recovers 10 health. Moving on from there, we also have her special skills, and just so we're clear, she also gains access to Moonbow and Luna, which is essentially what you're seeing here, just without the HP regen, but she mostly has access to Aether, which is the combination of Luna and another ability by the name of Soul. And basically what that does is it resolves combat as if the unit has suffered negative 50% res and defense, and then of course Soul's effect of giving back half the damage dealt as health to that unit. Not only that, but after taking so much damage, she'll also activate Defiant Speed, which grants speed plus 3, 5, or 7 based on rank if she is below or equal to 50% health, meaning she will do more damage, she'll hit more often, and also take less hits overall. And to top it all off, she also has Spur Attack, which grants adjacent allies attacks plus 2, 3, or 4 during combat. Oh man, okay, it is time to dive straight into pros and cons with this one because there are more pros than any cons, really. So right off the bat, Lucina has fantastic attack stats, like probably some of the higher in the game right now. She is able to do a lot of damage, and well, with those skills, she's going to be doing so much more. Not only that, but these skills add to her survivability, her weapon gives her health every third turn, and Aether, of course, regens health based on half damage, so all in all, good survivability as well. Not only that, but plus Spur Attack, and her HP gated ability is actually somewhat useful. It's a complete package here. She also has Dragon Killer, which just adds a cherry on the top to this already fantastic unit. If I were to give her any sort of con at all, it's just that she has low defense and low res. She also has slightly moderate speed, but I'm not going to dock her for that because of course she has her Defiant Speed. But at the end of the day, Lucina is a monster, not to be trifled with, and definitely a big portion of the red meta as well. Granted, she might falter a bit when it comes to blue units like every red unit does, but if you get Lucina, you have one of the best red units in the game up to this point. Consider yourself blessed. Hashtag blessed? Nah, I'm not gonna do that. But anyways, moving on aside from the powerhouse that is Lucina, it's time to move on to blue. And blue has some pretty complicated units, but above all else, a really nice one that I like to pick out right now, and that is Abel. So if you've ever wanted a unit that can really deal with a bit more of the red meta, more particular the Lucinas or the sword users, you might want to pick up Abel because he is very, very good at dealing with them. And we'll get into this right now with his weapon Brave Lance Plus. It's a normal Brave weapon. It docks speed, but gives him the ability to attack twice. Moving on from that, his special ability is Holy Vestments / Aegis. So basically what happens is he takes less damage from units 2 tiles away once the charge is full, and that comes in 2 flavors of 30% and 50% based on which one you've upgraded to. Moving on from there, we also of course have HP Plus, which, well, grants 3, 4, 5 HP based on rank. And then, of course, there's the bigger portion, Swordbreaker. And what Swordbreaker does is that if his HP is greater than or equal to 90, 70, or 50 based on rank, the unit who is using the sword, well, they can't make a follow-up attack, and he can. And, well, that's pretty much all of his abilities, so I guess it's time to move on to the pros and cons and discuss Abel a bit better. So, I'll just say this right now, he has reliable attack. It's not something to write home about, but he does have a good enough attack that he will do substantial damage, especially against reds. Add to the fact that he also has Swordbreaker, effectively making him an anti-swords unit, meaning Lucina, Marth, Roy, these characters will not do as well against Abel, and he might possibly be able to destroy them as well. Outside of that, I have to say his cons are kind of substantial when it comes down to it. The main problem here is that his ability relies a lot on health, and if it falls below that percentile, he won't be doing as well against sword units, and that means that he might just fall flat when it comes to being the blue unit you want to use, and that is just no good. Add in the fact that his speed is quite low, it means he won't be dealing much damage, and he'll also be taking more hits, so it's really up to you if you want to use him. But still, a good anti-sword unit doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, especially right now when reds are quite the big portion of meta, and a lot of them use swords. So while Abel's great, blue is fun to hang around, let's move on to green and try out another character who wields a giant axe, and that would be Sheena. Now, Sheena is the first green tank that I can really think of when it comes down to it. She's an armored unit, she's much more bulkier, and she also has access to the Killer Axe Plus, which lets her abilities recharge faster by 1, and that ties into her ability Escotcheon, which reduces enemy attacks by 5 to foes within 2 spaces from her through the next actions, etc, etc. Basically, it's just an AoE debuff. She also has access to Buckler, which is 30% reduced damage inflicted by attacks from adjacent allies. I just unfortunately could not fit that in there without trying to have to, well, change the elements that we have on screen right now. Moving on to passive, she has Valen Shield, which neutralizes effective against bonuses, and this only applies to her. And what this basically means is that it negates things like, say, if there were Armor Slayer on a unit, or they were wielding a hammer. It doesn't negate the color triangle, it just negates special effects on weapons that might be a harm to her. And then of course we also have Fortify Defense, which grants +2 and 3, she only has 2 levels of this, to allies adjacent to her at the start of each turn. We also have another ability, Fortify Armor, and what this does is that if there are any more armored units with her on the field adjacent to her, she'll grant +6 defense and 6 res to those units at the start of every turn. So I guess I'll just start off by saying Sheena is a good character, but also has several flaws. Mostly, she has a really solid attack, she's very bulky, and she has some useful debuffs and buffs if you decide to use them. But on the adverse, she has small movement because she's an armored unit, and she has low speed, meaning she'll take more hits. And right now, I can't really think for the life of me of any real character that has an Armor Slayer ability, but I'm sure as time goes on, more units like this will be added, so she might have the advantage when it comes down to it. But right now, she's very good at being a bulky shield, taking damage, buffing allies, and hopefully being able to lead the charge with a decent enough attack. But your mileage may vary. And that might be a bit more towards green. We'll discuss a lot more about this later as we leave and start to talk about, well, the end slate, which is coming right up. Alrighty, we've made it through that. Hopefully there's no problems and people aren't mad at me in the comments, but who knows. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to just explain a few things real quick before we move on. One, a lot of these videos have been focused on summons that you can only get at 5 stars. We haven't been focusing on units that you can upgrade to 5 stars and how they might be good as well. So I hope you don't mind that I'm going to try and make a list out of that as well. Also, earlier I asked you guys what would be a terrible unit, and originally I didn't like the idea too much, but we're going to be moving on from like the worst unit to most disappointing units, because really in this game there is no terrible unit. They all kind of have their own predestined goals, and that might not be the most amazing, but they are, well, units that you can use, and they do have their uses. So we're going to be moving on from worst to most disappointing. It just feels a bit better than just calling out a bunch of units and going, this one's terrible, and giving all these reasons, when I could be giving them, a little bit more of an earnest review. And other than that, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, comment, share it with your friends. Let's see here. Follow me on Twitter, that really helps. I would love to talk to you guys about Fire Emblem units and all that fun stuff. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. Catch you next time for the next unit review.